I'm Matthew Croucher. I'm a psychiatrist of old age. I specialise in older persons' mental health. We're here to talk through the different effects of alcohol on us as we get older. What we're going to talk about now is the most vulnerable organ and the most important organ from the perspective of older people that alcohol can affect. We're not talking about the heart, not talking about the liver, we're talking about the brain. Now, there are lots of ways that alcohol, especially when it's taken over many years, even at what seem like low doses, can affect the brain. First and most important way is that alcohol is in and of itself a toxin. It's a poison for brain cells. I've had a little dish here where I was growing human brain cells, and I take a tiny amount of alcohol and tip it in. They'd die. I don't think that's a surprise to most of us if we think about it. We know that alcohol affects how our brains work. We know that it's perhaps not so good for us. In fact, when we're young, perhaps we're seeking some of those effects. But when we're older and we've got a more vulnerable brain, we've got to think about that more carefully to weigh up the pros and cons. The big word is dementia. In New Zealand, alcohol is one of our top 5 causes of dementia in older people. And by dementia, I mean my brain is no longer able to keep up and do the normal jobs that I need it to do during the day. Remembering, moving, feeling, thinking, and sensing from the outside world. I want us to remember though that there are nerve cells in our bodies that aren't in our brains. That's where most of them are. But of course we've got nerves running down our spinal cord and out to all the different parts of our bodies. We've got to think about them too. And a surprising fact that you might not realise is that some of the most vulnerable nerve cells in your body are actually in the nerves. If you think about it, the nerves that go all the way down to your toes are enormous. Those nerve cells start off in your back and go all the way down. That's more than 1 metre long for some of us taller people. Those cells are very vulnerable to damage. So how might alcohol cause damage to our nerve cells? Both these big, long, vulnerable ones, but also the much smaller but critical ones in our brains. We've got direct toxic effects, and I mentioned that before. Second one is the effects of head injury. Now here, you might think head injury, brains, aren't we talking about those rugby players in America or Muhammad Ali? Actually, we're also talking about people that fall over. You are here thinking about falls and trying to lower your risk of falls. Well, any time you fall over and bang your head, any time that you see stars, any time that it takes you a minute or two to collect yourself and get your brain working properly again after you pick yourself up off the floor, that is a time when you've probably sustained a small amount of damage to your brain by banging your head as you went down. Each time we do that, the damage can slowly accumulate. And that's a big deal when our brains are older and more vulnerable. So we've got direct toxic effects on our nerve cells. We've got the effects of banging our head, which alcohol can increase the risk of. There are 2 more key ways that alcohol can affect our brains. The third way is that as we're getting older and as alcohol can begin to exert its effects on our bodies, we start to become less well nourished. Now there's the total amount of nutrition where I'm starting to get thinner and thinner, and you might notice that most 80 and 90-year-olds are much skinnier than your average 60 or 70-year-old. So there's that general malnutrition. But very importantly for our brains, there's also some important vitamins and minerals. You might know that when your doctor wants to check you out for possible effects of alcohol on your body, he or she will often organise a blood test. And one of those things that doctors measure are those vitamins. Things like thiamine, vitamin B1, or folate, or vitamin B12. These are so important for how our nerve cells are working. But alcohol can lower the amount of those key vitamins that we can bring into our bodies. Now the fourth way that alcohol can interfere with our brain health, the fourth important way, is how alcohol can affect the blood supply to our brain. We're going to learn about the effects of alcohol on blood pressure and heart function. Well, all of that can play itself out to also impact on how well our brain can be supplied with glucose and oxygen to keep it running, and to take away carbon dioxide and the toxins that need to be cleared up. Even while you're sitting there, your brain is so hungry. It's using a massive proportion of your body's energy supplies right now just thinking. So anything that can interfere with that is something that we need to take care of in order to keep our brain healthier. Now, what about these nerves down to our feet? Because I did keep mentioning them. They're really important for falls. It turns out that those long nerves are not just there to drive our muscles, they're also there to bring back to the brain messages from our skin and our joints, messages that tell us, where are my feet? Now, if you think about it, you're walking on uneven ground, or if you go down the corridor and turn around and come back, so you're just turning a corner, you really need to know where your feet are to stop yourself from falling over. In other words, your balance is really critical. It's those long nerves that are absolutely key to keeping your balance. But those long nerves, those big, more than a metre long nerves in our bodies, are very vulnerable to damage from all of those causes we talked about with the brain. Direct toxic effects of alcohol, the effects on nutrition, damage from falls, and damage from poor blood supply gradually over the years. It's a bit of a litany of horrors, but keeping our brains healthy is surely one of the key things that we want to do as we get older, especially because we might have some other diseases gradually accumulating. What if the blood supply to my brain and my heart and everything else is no longer tip-top? What if in 15 years' time I might go on to develop Alzheimer's disease? Well, for all those reasons, we want to minimize the damage that we can control. Damage from the amount of alcohol that we're gradually accumulating around our brain as we get older. It's just another thing to weigh up. Next time we're going to talk about a completely different aspect of how brains can be affected by alcohol, one that isn't to do with chemicals and toxins and brain cells, but equally as important.